Okay, so this session is going to be about how can foresight be used in corporations and in different economic sectors. So we are going to have three presentations. Each one, remember, is 25 minutes, and that includes some time for questions and answers. So if you speak for maybe 20 minutes so that we can have 5 minutes at the end, that would be fantastic. Okay, so this is also a really international panel because we have people from 3 countries. And because we are in Russia, let's begin with the Russians. Is that okay? So we have Yuri Dranев, who is from here, from the Higher School of Economics, and he's going to talk about forecasting of technology impact on economic development using industry clusters. So clusters is a very powerful technique, and the Higher School of Economics is very good at showing visualizations with clusters. So, Yuri, please.
Yeah, thank you very much for the opportunity to give a talk at this conference. Actually, it's sort of difficult after you raise so important issues and trends about immortality, and then there was a speech about the future of technologies. I'm going to talk about economic issues, which is sort of boring comparing to that insight. So, but anyway, I want to describe some approach to foresight that we develop in the Institute for Statistical Studies and Economics of Knowledge here in HEC, High School of Economics. Yeah, the main approach, I will briefly try to describe it, and also I will avoid all mathematical expressions, all equations, and try to explain what we are trying to do and what we achieved so far. First, I'll start with a review of approaches, very brief, nothing technical. Then I will go through methodology stages and demonstrate our software architecture and also the results of our forecasts, and probably conclude with some implications. So, very briefly, there are a lot of models out there that are trying to estimate the impact of science, technology, and innovation on economic development. So here you see some examples of those models. There are different approaches. So starting from Nemesis, one of the major projects in Europe, actually last year, the people that developed this model, they came to Russia and gave a talk here in this room and described the model, but not in this conference, in another one. So there are also other approaches which elaborate the principle of the idea of equilibrium. So here, 2 other models, also major projects. There are some dynamic stochastic equilibrium models. Again, here 2 examples of the most famous ones. And also there are different approach agent-based models, and here you can see the names of these 2. Okay, our approach is close to others, but with some interesting, I think, interesting issues that we raised. And here I'd like to compare our approach to Nemesis. First of all, why Nemesis? Because our approach is also econometric, but instead of recursive dynamic, we are forward-looking. So we're trying to bring foresight into economic modeling. So we're trying to study all types of possible scenario paths and foresight development. So the main idea that is different from other approaches is that we use some clusters of technologically close industries, and beside that idea, I will, of course, tell a few words about it in the next slides. Beside that, we carefully study technology effects on different structural parameters of economy, capital, labor, and others. We use expert estimates and some external estimates for these technology effects. Also, we try to elaborate an issue of public-private R&D, which is very important for Russia because the major part of R&D in Russia comes from public sources, from our budget. We also, of course, Nemesis is much bigger model, a lot of characteristics in it, so the R&D model there is much more advanced. They consider high and low skilled labor. We don't yet, so we're going into that direction. So the main idea again is cluster vision of economy. So it started as some technical tool, but then it comes to some interesting, I think, results, and that's why it's the main idea behind the whole model. First we start with clusterization of industries. We estimate those cluster parameters. Then we try to estimate impact of technologies on each industry. So we have a list of technologies because we're doing this major project, Russia 2030 Science and Technology Foresight, and we study all types of, our colleagues study all types of technologies. We combine experts from all different directions to provide some estimates, as usual in Foresight. Then, after these two things, we consider several STI policy scenarios. And scenarios actually determine the future cluster structure, and they also affect the technology-enabled transformation of industries. So what after all this analysis, we come to future vision of economy. If we apply this model to Russia, and of course we mostly apply it to Russia, we come to 5 clusters of industries, 59 industries, it's NACE classification, 50 technology groups, and we can answer several questions about what is the future of our economy in Russia. Again, you can apply it to other countries as well. So what sectors will dominate, how technologies will affect industries, what is export potential, what is potential for import substitution, and what is future labor structure of economy. So here is probably the main slide. So this slide describes this cluster vision of economy. This and next one, actually. There are two approaches to clusterization of industries. So we picked some number of parameters and try to find industries that are close in a technological way. So here you can see the example of clusterization in Russia. So there are different industries combined. So we try to think of some names that determine these clusters and the structure of economy. So the first cluster describes the industrial companies that have a major export potential. The second cluster describes industrial companies that industrial sector that has a great potential for import substitution. Finally, there is there are 3 more, of course. One more is about primary sector, so it's mining and related industries. There are 2 clusters of service industries as well. So we determine some growth parameters of those clusters, and then forecast those parameters according to STI policy scenarios. I'd like to mention here that clusters are not geographical. They're not geographically linked as an approach that is elaborated by our colleagues in our institute in Russian Cluster Observatory. That's why we're looking purely at technology caused relation between industries. So how we look at it? There are two traditional, there are two approaches to clustering. First one is traditional, when you use k-means or whatever. We just can study industries and their parameters for 10 years and cluster them according to those parameters. And this approach has some drawbacks, because when we suggest that the parameters of these clusters will continue at the same pace or at a different pace according to scenario, then we also suggest that industries in those clusters will behave similarly, which is not actually true, and this is very controversial assumption. So there is another more interesting dynamic clustering approach. So here we try to look at effect of capital and labor inputs into gross value added for each group, and try to find the industries that actually evolve in a similar way. So their dependence of their gross value added on capital and labor is very similar. Then we suggest that those weights of capital and labor are going to evolve similarly in the long term, and this approach, I think, is less controversial because we have the history of similar behavior of industries. So we might suggest that at least before some point, those industries will behave similarly again. So an industry may transfer from one cluster to another as a result of technology shock. In the second case, the clusterization is actually a solution of some optimization procedure. Actually, I couldn't find, we couldn't find the method that describe this procedure in the literature, but we have a solution with our colleagues. This procedure clusterization try to find the best fit of for gross value added by capital and labor inputs. So this is the clusterization part. Now we're coming to more straightforward part, the technology impact on an industry. So here we considered several types, key areas of technology development. Here ICT, so internet communication technologies, biotech, transport, and so on. Of course, we have great material about these technologies. We studied them for many years in the institute. So we have conducted some Delphi analysis and used it as an expert estimate of, first of all, domestic relative technology readiness level compared to world level. And of course, the key technology effects of each technology in this area on each industry that we consider. So we obtained some matrices of technologies' impacts on industry parameters. What next? Next is STI policy scenarios. So what is STI policy in this case, in this model? It is It determines probable models of technology development and also public R&D distribution among priorities. So those priorities are determined in some strategic documents of Russian Federation, for example. And of course, using this public R&D distribution, we can somehow model the R&D, the private R&D, and with, of course, involvement of other parameters and R&D intensity in future periods. So STI policy effects will affect adjustments of future industry parameters. So parameters will not be only determined by cluster dynamics, but also will be affected by technologies. We can forecast cluster growth depending on STI policy scenario choice. And STI policy determines also on the macro level scenario paths and possible shifts between scenarios. Now, the concluding stage of the model is actually industries forecasting. So here we again assume that industries will evolve according to the cluster dynamics it belongs, but at the same time we are taking into consideration the technology impact on the industries. So here you can see that STI policy will cause an adjustment of industry parameters. So the productivity growth of industry will depend on those adjustments of demand, capital, labor, energy, and other intermediates. Also adjustment because of competitiveness of each industry. Of course, the distance to technology transfer frontier is very important. So how far we lagging behind United States in terms of productivity. And also we take into consideration some inter-industry effects through input-output tables. The adjustment of parameters may cause an industry to move from one cluster to another. And of course, this could be a great issue. So the cluster structure is not stable during the forecasting period, so it could change. And here you can see the future. After all this modeling, we can come up with future vision of each industry. And as you can see from this slide, the future vision include many parameters such as gross value added, domestic consumption, export-import, labor force, R&D intensity, and even key technologies that are important for this sector. After that, we use bottom-up approach, so we aggregate everything up to the whole economy, so we can say about structure of economy, structure of labor force, structure of R&D, everything. That's it with the model. Here you see with methodology, not with the model. The whole talk is about the model. So this is software architecture, very basic scheme of it. So you see we use Microsoft Azure as a cloud database. We use different data sources. For example, we use developed by our colleagues very powerful tool called i4, which allows us to analyze a whole bunch of information from very different sources. Of course, we use traditional data sets such as OECD, World Input-Output Database, Comtrade and other trade statistics, world claims, and so on. What else? On top of this database, the programming model is built, and the programming model allows us to structure data from different sources, and it allows us to cluster industries, estimate technology impact, R&D model, and of course come up with final forecasting estimates. And after this, we can use some very basic model for analysis. We use just Microsoft built-in Power BI. I will say a few words now about our results. So scenarios for Russia policy, STI policy are described here. So here you can see two main scenarios that we consider during our foresight right now. One scenario is technology adaptation, and the other one is technology breakthrough. So these are main parameters of those scenarios that actually determine the parameters of those scenarios. STI policy determines not only scenario paths, but possible shift between scenarios. And for current conditions and for our estimates, the possible shift could happen between 2020 and 2025. So you can see here, this is the picture how the shift could happen. And actually, we have estimates, of course, according to our model, when this shift is possible. So here you see the GDP growth in scenario of technology breakthrough and in more desirable scenario of technology adaptation. Now, here we have clusters in 2015 and 2030 for two types of scenarios. You see that the most advanced cluster, the first cluster, could be eliminated in 2030 in scenario of technology adaptation. But it will increase 3 times in terms of GDP share in scenario of technology breakthrough. Similarly, you can see here different weights of different clusters. So this is the cluster vision of economy in 2015 and 2030. We have these illustrated in those circles, pies. So you see here that the service sector in 2035 will probably grow. There are, sorry for some Russian notes here, because our database is just translated in Russian, so we're going to work on English version of it, of course. Now here you see the clusters, that how they change. So you see that industries from one cluster goes to another. And again, we have 5 clusters at the beginning in 2015, and then 5 clusters in 2035 in case of nice scenario, in case of breakthrough scenario. So you see the cluster structure will change a lot. Now, here, what is the actually growth, gross value added in 2 scenarios? You see that there are some major differences between 2 scenarios, but actually our model allows to simulate many scenarios. So based on different STI policies, so we change here the share of public R&D in GDP, and you see that there are many different scenarios according to just moving of this one parameter. Now here you see some gross value added by industry groups. It's not cluster structure, but just industry structure of economy, and you see that some groups are growing much faster than others. Here, similarly, on the second level of hierarchy, so you see that there are major differences in 2015 and 2035. there are some parameters of economic parameters that we also estimated in this technology breakthrough scenario. Labor structure, we studied it as well. Again, the point that we're missing here is that high skill and low skill labor should be divided. We have estimates of technology effects, but it's not built into the model yet. So here you see experts, and you see that this major gray area in 2015 is, of course, mining and oil, and it's decreasing significantly in the 2035 in this breakthrough scenario. So here the main conclusions about what will happen in different scenarios. GDP growth in technology adaptation will be low, of course. So highest share of government, construction, and some other service sectors. But in technology breakthrough, we can see that industrial sectors will evolve. At the same time, the service sectors will evolve even more, and the share of service sectors will be huge in the economy, which also reasonable because of the structure of economies in most developed countries. Now you see some figures about export estimates and import estimates. So the final statement at the bottom of the slide says that we can lose 40 trillion rubles in budget income compared in best scenario compared to scenario of technology breakthrough. So finally, a few conclusions and future research. So I would suggest that proposed model allows us to estimate technology impact and STA policy on economic development. I think that cluster vision of economy is very useful, not only as a modeling tool, but also as a probable instrument for choice of STI policy. And here I'd like to mention some future research. So it will include probably implementation of equilibrium into our model, despite the fact that it will kill foresight in our study. But this is probably the so we can choose different visions, equilibrium vision and foresight vision as well. Of course, we need to elaborate our model more, so we need some R&D and labor improvements, and adaptive scenario approach that we actually we research together with Austrian Saritas, Professor Austrian Saritas, and we published a paper recently, but it's not embedded into the model yet. So we can use this real option approach as we suggested in this study. Actually, we can use some new technologies. It's difficult to imagine. You think we're just thinking about just traditional forecasting. No, we're thinking about artificial intelligence instruments as well. And we're trying to build in neural network analysis into our forecasting, and not just one-stage neural network analysis, but several stages, like in machine learning and artificial intelligence architecture. So, yeah, of course, it's interesting to apply a model to different countries and even to multi-country model, as it was done in many other cases in major for other major models, and use more complicated trade model as well. Thank you very much. If you have any questions, please let me know.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Yuri, I'm pretty sure there will be questions, but there is no time. You ran 3 minutes over time.
Oh, sorry.
So we'll have them maybe at the end. Okay, now we have Nick Vonnortas, who is a very good contributor of the Higher School of Economics, and I met him here before, but he's also a professor at the George Washington University in Washington, D.C., in the USA, and he will be talking about corporate foresight and innovation. He always has very interesting presentations, and so he will be focusing on the effects of integrative capabilities and organizational learning. Nick, you have 20 minutes.
Of course, I sent it yesterday.
Oh, okay. So, okay, we can take a question for Yuri. It's going to take time. Okay. So, do you want? Okay. So let's move from Washington, D.C. to Thailand. Okay. So we have Chaiyatorn Limapornvanich. I hope my pronunciation is okay, from the Ministry of Science and Innovation of Thailand, and he's going to give us a comparative review of public foresight institutions. So please.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Chaiyatorn Limapornvanich. I'm from National Innovation Agency, Thailand. Actually, the idea of the topic that I present today is not quite technical or complicated like the topic that we previously talked this morning. The idea of the topic is about why and how organizations like NIA would like to adopt foresight to their practice. Yes, and first of all, I would like to thank you, and it's my great pleasure to have an opportunity to join the conference because it's the first time, and from the beginning, I learned a lot of your experience and work, and this is the first time that I come to join the Foresight seminar. And before that, I would like to give you about the brief information about NIA first. NIA is a government agency under the Ministry of Science and Technology. We are the core organization. Sorry, may I have? Thank you. I think this one the wrong one. Maybe another one on the desktop. Oh, yeah.
At Singularity University, we say that the problem is not AI. The problem is always AV, audiovisuals. That's the problem, audiovisuals. It is not artificial intelligence. And don't be afraid about artificial intelligence. Be afraid of human stupidity. And human stupidity, unfortunately, is very natural. All humans are stupid. Okay, we are ready? Good.
Sorry. So, the brief information about NIA, we are a government agency under Ministry of Science and Technology. Actually, we are a core organization to promote and facilitate creation, management, and exploitation of innovation in Thailand. But actually, our focus is on utilization and commercialization of research and development. We not do research ourselves. So we quite focus on how research can be used, can be commercialized. If you look at this chart, it's going to give you more the big picture of the STI governance of Thailand. Actually, at the top is the Prime Minister Office, and also Prime Minister Office have three organizations: NRCT, National Research Council of Thailand, NSTIC, National Science, Technology and Innovation Council, and also NESDB, National Economic Social Development Board. All these three organizations is like assistant or consultant of the government to develop the policy, to decide the policy for the government. And the next level is a ministry level. And actually, NIA, we are under the Ministry of Science and Technology. We not involve much in the policy development, but basically we adopt policy and we implement the policy in terms of innovation development in Thailand. Here is the role of NIA. I think this quite show that the unique role of NIA, because in previous slide you can see that many organizations at the third level, from TRF, NRCT, all these organizations, most of them are quite focused on R&D. Some running a foresight in terms of to do R&D roadmap, to do technology roadmap. But in terms of NIA, we quite different because we not in the area of R&D, but our focus is try to connect the R&D side from the market side of to convert or to translate R&D into innovation. So the aspect or the perspective of running foresight or doing foresight is quite maybe different from the one who come from the demand side, because we quite focus on how R&D can be utilized, where it should be utilized. Yeah. And here is some operation framework. Basically, we provide financial and technology support to the private sector. We also do upgrading technological and innovative capability for the company. We also run activity like enhancing network and private enterprise. We promote innovation culture and awareness and creating international exposure and partnership. Here is all the framework of NIA. And you may ask that how to convert the creativity to innovation. Here is the way that we running and our operation framework. The first one, we try to encourage people, try to make the creativity to be practical, to be commercialized. We provide them a financial support. We provide them a market opportunity for them to convert their idea, to change their idea to like a prototype or to the innovation product. But sometimes just idea and prototype is not enough to do innovation. For this case, it's like a medical instrument that developed from a medical doctor from one of a renowned university in Thailand. But because the mindset or the perspective of the researcher is quite different from someone from the market. So when they develop the device, they try to make it good, try to make it very nice. So it's made with like a metal, like a industrial grade metal to make this instrument. But because this kind of operation is quite a rare operation in Thailand, and you just have like maybe 10 or 12 doctors that be expert in this area. So if you develop the product that very nice and have from the metal, the doctor can use for long. So you cannot develop business for this kind of idea, for this kind of R&D. So we go to help them to create, to transform their product and to co-create with them to find the new business model for their product. So they matching them with the company who running the business in medical grade polymer to convert the metal medical instrument to a plastic medical instrument. So in this case, when it's going to be like a disposable instrument, and this one make them to create, to build up their business and to sell this product to the global market. This is the way that we run our business today. But because it seems that just only provide them funding and help them to do that is not enough for Thailand now, because Thailand is at the edge of transformation. We're dealing with various significant challenges, from economic struggle to social issue. For example, in terms of economic struggle, we from the past, you can see that in the past, Thailand was doing well in terms of economy. But there are three struggles that we face during past 50 years. The first one is in around maybe 1998. We have a crisis. We call it Tom Yam Kung crisis. This makes the economy of Thailand struggle. The second time is the global financial crisis or hamburger crisis. And the last time that we face the economic struggle is around maybe 2011. It's come from the massive flooding in Thailand. So all these things we cannot predict. All these things we didn't prepare for it before. In terms of social issue, we Thailand also have facing some social issue. We are likely to rapid becoming an aging society. Only 13% of the population was elderly in 2010, but we predict that it's gonna reach 32% by 2040. Also, we also have the problem with social issue on disability, because the number of disabilities in Thailand is around maybe 1.7 million people. And most of them are in the rural area and have a difficulty in accessing healthcare. So this one is the social issue that we may face in the near future. We also have like a climate change, issue with climate change. We have the drought crisis in 2016 that affect a lot of the agriculture production and make the farmers lost around maybe 15 billion baht. But in some area, even some area have a problem with drought crisis. But in some area, we also have the problem with severe flooding. I think it's in the picture is the event on 2011. But in the past few years, we are facing severe flooding and in many areas, and it seems get worse and worse each year. So, because to overcome this challenge, we believe that innovation will be the solution for them. But because when we talk about innovation, it's about something new. It's about something that you never expect before. So basically, they have many uncertainties and fluctuations that make us difficult to predict about the future. Recently, foresight has been introduced into the policy domain in Thailand. But because foresight is quite a new way of thinking for Thai people, we quite familiar with the conventional way of thinking, like a forecast, predict something from the background data, predict something from the current situation. But for the foresight, we need to change the mentality, change the perspective of a policymaker to believe or to understand about the foresight. So that's why we try to set up the foresight unit in my organization. And in order to make these foresight units maybe have a planned strategically, so we go to review some foresight institution around the world. And we pick up 6 foresight organizations in this chart. From the review, we found that what is the difference between them is the objective and focus. For example, the top 2 CSF from Singapore, Center for Strategic Future, and government UK, both of them quite focused on, for example, CSF, they quite focused on the direction of the country, because Singapore is not a big country. They're just a small country. They focus on the direction of the country, how the country will be developed in the future, because they don't have resource. They have people, capability people. So they would like to know that in the future, what is the direction that the country should go. But for the government UK, most of the study or most of their work is quite focused on issue, like a social issue, economic issue. But compared to the in the second row, Sita from Finland or strategic foresight from Sweden, they quite focus on the area that they quite focus is on the study how to reform the country, what is the change in the future. But compared to the third one, Mike from Malaysia and BMBF Foresight from German, both of them is quite focused on the wrong term of demand side development. They focus on the industry, how what is the direction of the industry, what is the technology that the industry can be used. And for the last group is like a niche step and kite step. Both of them quite focused on the technology, STI development, and where to invest STI development. But even they have quite different objective and focus. But in terms of practice, methodology, and success factor is quite the same. Here is what review from reviewing those 8 institutions. We found that contribution to the policy come in maybe 4 areas. The first one is addressing the dynamic of change. Because this one is the state that they identify problem, possible change, and effect of change. And then the second contribution is conceptualize long-term scenario. At this stage, they anticipate the outcome of change and what the future will be look like. Contribution number 3 is determining direction and priority. This one is the state that they formulate policy and solution for handle with those changes. And the last one is raising awareness through communication. At this stage, they try to drive publicity and awareness. So we found that even those 8 institutions have different focus, but most of work that they have done is quite have a contribution to innovation policy in these 4 areas. And the most important is about the validity and credential of the future picture that they gain through their practice. So the important thing that they focus is about the rigorous approach, the way that they come up with the future picture. And another key factor is about a competent network of experts. They also always have the network with the competent experts around the world, even in the country, even in the sector that they focus. So for implication for NIA, so we come up with the design of the way that we would like to go. So we think that to build up the unit for the foresight, we need maybe 5 steps to go. The first one, we have to have a clear goal and scope of work, that which area that we would like to focus, which is the stakeholder that we would like to work with. And then we have to explore the context and the content of the area that we interest. And after that, it's a process that we have to go like climb up like the S-curve. We have to climb up the S-curve to be like the unit that can be very good in the foresight. The first one, we need the network of experts and network of stakeholders that come to help us to give opinion, give their expertise to decide that which future that we should go. The third one is about the rigorous practice and the tool and platform development. We need tool and platform to run the foresight. As many speakers mentioned in this morning, many advanced technology have been used, but actually we at the early stage. So maybe the first rigorous practice that we can try is by using the network of experts to help us to develop picture of future or scenario. And the fourth one is about the communication and consensus. It's the way that we publicize of our work to the public, to share the vision, to get the consensus from the public. And the last one, we can come up with the policy suggestion, maybe to the ministry or maybe to the prime minister or to the government. Here is the framework of strategic function that we think the foresight unit should be run in this area. So this one is a picture of some of activity that we have run so far. Actually, the foresight project is start last year in Thailand. So now we try to build up the futurist network. So we running many activity in this area, and we have like communicating to the public. When we got the idea, when we got the picture of the future, we try to communicate to the public to let them know that the direction of the future and where should we go in the future. So that all from my presentation, and thank you for your attention.
Okay. We do have some time for him. He was very punctual, 20 minutes, so we can take maybe a couple of questions. I think it's very interesting what he showed about Thailand and comparisons. So comments or questions? Well, if there are not from the, okay, yes. Okay, Nick?
We noticed here that on your slide about the organizations you visited, you did not visit this one for foresight. HSE is missing.
Yes, maybe. sorry.
Next year it will be, right?
Yeah.
Yes, all right.
Yeah, actually, that's a good point, but HSC is not a government.
ISEC. Yeah.
But he was, he was basically comparing the government. We have a question in the back, please.
Скажите, пожалуйста, известны ли вам основы научно-технической политики Китая и методики работы с будущим именно вот китайские?
Yeah, he's asking about China and if you know anything about the foresight process in China. Yeah.
Actually, for the case of China, I sorry, and don't have many information about China. I didn't include the foresight institution of China in my review. Yeah.
Okay, any more comments or questions? If no more comments or questions, then we finally move back to Nick. Are you ready, Nick?
I know.
Okay.
Are we ready?
So, let's go back to corporate foresight and innovation.
Yes, that's it. Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. It's too late, so I'm sorry for this little glitch. I thought it was on the computer already. So I've heard all these big ideas this afternoon, people going very deep into the future of humanity, and I will stay very much at the surface of things. So I'm going to take you at a much lower level of analysis, at the level of the individual corporation. So in addition to countries, there are also the corporations that need foresight. Many of them actually do this quite a bit. If I may have that, many of them do this quite a bit, and the reason they do it is because they are they have noticed that those of them who are better prepared for the future usually survive much longer. So what I'm going to describe today is the summary of the results of this paper here. It's not just me, it's 3 more people. All these 3 co-authors are from Korea University in Seoul. What I will do for you is this paper. This paper is going to be published very soon in the journal Technology Analysis and Strategic Management. Here is a way to build a sort of an argument at the level of the organization about how one can actually measure the effects of foresight in the private sector and what other factors may affect those effects in terms of innovativeness. How do they translate in innovativeness? So many people keep talking about this. There is something that is called corporate foresight. We know a lot, and we have some prior literature actually that tell us that there is a positive association between foresight and innovativeness and actually profits, results. However, the way of how this happens is much less researched. We don't know really why there is a positive link between foresight and results. And the contextual conditions in which the foresight actually influences innovativeness are also not very clear. You see some of the literature there, but this is not all, right? So what we do here is 2 things. A very, very simple model with very complicated data. We do this, we propose actually that something that is called organizational learning plays a mediator role, so it mediates foresight towards innovation. So sits in the middle, you need that in order to actually make use of the foresight and the results you get are much better this way. So you see sort of a suggestion of what this organizational learning is something very, very simple, very straightforward, is the effort of the company actually to experiment and learn from, experiment with many things and learn from various points of view. We do also this. There is a second step. We examine what is a contextual factor, actually important contextual factor that affects this mediation role of organizational learning. Right? So we have foresight, we have innovation, we have in the middle organizational learning, and now we have a factor that affects the role in between. This factor is called integrative capabilities, and it's nothing else than the ability of the organization to actually pull information together from different places, both from internal sources but also from external sources. This is very relevant in an era of open innovation, right? So this is our simple model. This is very, very, very straightforward, right? So you see corporate foresight, organizational learning, innovativeness, and in the middle, integrative capabilities, right? So we are trying to look how this works. We will have 4 research hypotheses. So we go from cause to effect, right? So we try to explain actually something. Not just show that it's happening, but to explain it. So the first one will be the typical that the literature has shown before, that there is a connection between foresight and innovativeness. The second one will be that there is actually organizational learning relates positively to foresight. There is a third hypothesis that it mediates. There is a mediation role, and then there is a 4th hypothesis of integrative capabilities, right? They play that role that I just said. So our data come from Korea, and thus the Korean colleagues that work with me. A very significant survey, very representative of Korean manufacturing. We have at the very end clean data for about 212 companies. We work at the organization level. We interview and we survey individuals, but as I will urge you, I don't have time to explain here, but as I will urge you to read in the paper, we go through a very, very detailed way of aggregating from the individuals to the organization. So we will look at simple workers, blue-collar workers. We will look at white-collar workers. We will look at managers. We will look at so there's a lot of surveying in these 212 companies. But all of these with statistical techniques are being aggregated to the level of the organization. And you see some. So you see here the type of respondents that came into the survey. You see at the bottom of this page here, right? So the way we measure these concepts, remember these are concepts that do not exist. We don't have primary data, so we need to create the data for these variables that we want to measure. So corporate foresight comes directly from this, which is a seminal paper in the field. It's an instrument that contains 11 items. And different things of foresight, looks at foresight in all these different ways. Those instruments, those 11 instruments look at foresight as an initiator, as a strategist, as a opponent roles, or whatever, all the roles of foresight, right? Then we look at organizational learning, which is the mediator, right? This is a 7-item instrument that comes out of these publications here that are pretty good. The integrative capabilities, yet another instrument that comes out of a couple of papers, one of which is in the gentleman's here in front journal in Technovation, and this is the Spanos and other papers. The final one is the innovativeness. What is the innovativeness of a company, right? How do you measure it? Not just the addition of patents and publications and whatever products. So there is a particular scale that has been proposed in the literature. If you read the paper, you will see that the data have been cured extremely carefully for psychometric characteristics and all those things that business people really want in order to make sure that the data say what it's supposed to say. Results will come out, this is aggregate results, will come out like this, but basically I will describe, it doesn't matter for you to read all these numbers here, but essentially you see that there is statistically important and positive relationships. Basically this is the first two factors, the size of the organization and the age are just controls. And the relationships are the others, what you see there. So this is the mediation and this is the moderation, right? The two relationships that we are looking at. But essentially the result is that all four hypotheses are supported, all four that I presented you before. So the first hypothesis is simply a re-evaluation of what has appeared already in the literature. So there is a connection between foresight and innovativeness. The second and the third take care of the mediation. Indeed, organizational learning seems to play a role, and it seems to be a positive role. Right? And the fourth is the hypothesis for integrative capabilities. Now, to close, because it is late in the day, all this is fine for theory, but the question is, who cares? I always ask this to myself at the very end. So, who gives a damn about this? We think that business people should actually pay attention to this because it says something fairly obvious, but it proves it with data. So I don't know if you can understand. So what it says that these two things are very important for industry. So at some point, having the capability and having the willingness to experiment and learn from making mistakes rather than taking ready solutions for the company is important. Right, so that's one, in making foresight useful to your innovativeness, right? So if you want to run foresight, if you want to try to anticipate something in the future, not read the future, simply be better in anticipating, and you want that to actually affect your innovativeness, you really need to have a corporate culture that tries and learns from different mistakes and good things, good and bad things, right? And the second thing that a corporation may want to know and pay attention to is that this will not happen actually without the ability to be able to integrate information which is not given. To integrate information from very many different sources. Putting together information from different sources is hard, is not automatic, right? But that will determine how well organizational learning will affect the relationship between foresight and innovativeness. Thank you.
Okay, Nick.
Short, right?
Yeah, that was very short.
Good.
Brief and to the point. But let's take some questions or comments. And while people are thinking, I have one. Have you thought about replicating that in another country like Russia?
It would be great. This is a good study, and we have developed a good now methodology out of this. So if there is data here, yes, it would be great actually to replicate it. Absolutely.
May I ask a question? Yeah. Yes, it would be great if we could make it in Russia. Yes, sure. But I'm afraid that not very many companies here did foresight so far. Unfortunately, not several hundreds at least. Yeah. But anyway, we could do it. Yeah. But I have a question. Yeah. We know many cases when big players who did very strong foresight exercises had very big problems after, in few years after they made foresight, like Daimler, when they merged with Chrysler, and then they again separated. Yeah, this one case. Another one, Nokia, for example. Yeah, they had very big problems. The third one, Deutsche Bank, they had a big foresight, and so we can give more cases. What do you think about these issues when they have big problems which they did not envisage within foresight, or maybe they envisaged but they didn't do anything to change the situation?
You're asking me. So. This is a great question, and I often ask myself this, and there may be several reasons. One simple reason may be that the foresight that different people run is really low quality, because what I see in the literature ranges from very good to really very bad. So people tend to throw numbers that are basically imaginary into foresight exercises, and you can go very wrong this way. The other reason may be exactly what this paper says. that they do foresight, they never implement it to innovativeness because they may be missing something in between. Right? The third explanation may be that the foresight is only at the very surface. So I have seen the foresights are very different in terms of detail. So I don't know to what extent these corporations do the same thing. There is no standardized process, which is one of the difficulties in this field. And they may be staying here or they may be going there. So there could be various reasons for this. But I'm a believer that those who try to anticipate will do better on average, right?
Okay, we have another question from Fabienne.
Thank you, Jose. Well, my question is about, I'm wondering if maybe the missing link you were just talking about could be transformation. For example, what we are seeing today in France is that we have had a kind of first generation of corporate foresight linking foresight and innovation. It was companies trying to be more efficient in the global competitiveness by innovating. Now we have a second generation, I think, of foresight inside companies when companies just try to adapt themselves to the challenges. Not in order to produce new products or services or whatsoever, but just to try to adapt their their structures, their management, their way of thinking, of doing, to, for example, climate change, digitalization, whatsoever. So it's another link, corporate foresight and transformation, not innovation. Have you observed this?
It's very difficult. I wouldn't say that I have observed it or I know exactly, but it sounds to me that the second generation is better in a sense that the professor from Drexel was talking about today, that they take into consideration not just the technology, the cold technology, right, but the organization, because the organization has a culture, and no matter how much innovation you do, the culture remains and stays for a long time, and it may not work at all. Okay, yes, in that sense, yes.
Other comments or questions? Yes, please.
I have relating some comment or question for you. I think the definition of the term is the difference between company and the government. For example, the government's long term, probably 20 to 30 years, but the industry sector probably long term is 10 years. So it's very different. Therefore, I think the definition is different, but their thinking also different.
Definitely, the horizons are very different. Actually, 10 years may be too optimistic for industry. 5 years may be better approximation.
Yes, and actually, our foresight is for long term, which is 20 to 30 years.
Yeah, well.
But somehow, the industry sector has been using our results more than the government because they want to know, I think they want to indicate the earlier stage of future vision, probably.
So I believe you very much, and the reason is very simple. The private sector has a bottom line. If you don't do well, you go out of business. Governments do not have a bottom line. So if you don't do well, you tax your citizens more or something, or you borrow. So it's a different incentive.
Nick, we have another question from our table here.
In your study, did you concern about the size of the company or the effect of the size of the company?
Yes. It's one of the control variables in those tables.
So the big firm and the small
It's not statistically significant in that sense.
Okay, I think we are getting to the end of the afternoon. So I just want to make two quick announcements. Tomorrow, we actually begin earlier. Tomorrow, registration is at 9 and the sessions begin at 9:30. So it is earlier than today. No, tomorrow is 9:30, according to the schedule. Okay? The other thing is there is going to be a happy hour in 20 minutes downstairs on the 4th floor, room 424 right here below, of the Spanish and Mexican communities of the Higher School of Economics. So if you want to go and practice English, Russian, or Spanish, there is a happy hour, so you will enjoy. It's a cocktail for everybody who wants to stay there. Room 424 in 20 minutes. And more comments, Alexander?
I just would like to say that it's been a long but great day. I guess I enjoyed personally very much with all presentations, and I hope it was interesting for the audience. Although not everybody survived until the end of the, but I hope we have a lot of interesting things to discuss for the rest of the conference. So I invite everybody to be here tomorrow morning, 9:30.
Yes, on time.
Okay.
So yes, thank you
very much.
everybody for being here. It has been a wonderful day, and we are looking forward to seeing you tomorrow at 9:30, and in half an hour for the Spanish party, huh? You know, we are going to have an event in Bangkok in February about immortality also.
Yes.
So I should send you information about that. So it's going to you get me your card. I don't have, but I'll send you an email because that should be very interesting. It's the first one we are going to do outside of the USA. And then, because you know there is medical tourism in Thailand, and Thailand is a very interesting country for Westerners, as you know. So